This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. As we turn now to the latest twist in the multi-billion-dollar lawsuit against the oil giant Chevron. Last week, a federal court in Manhattan ordered a documentary filmmaker to hand over to Chevron hundreds of hours of footage. Joseph Berlinger's award-winning film Crude, The Real Price of Oil, chronicles the struggle of indigenous Ecuadorians against ChevronTexacos oil contamination of their land. It focuses on the 17-year legal battle between Chevron and 30,000 Ecuadorians who say their land, rivers, wells, livestock and bodies were poisoned by decades of reckless oil drilling in the rainforest. Chevron sought Berlingers' Outtakes to help defend itself against an Ecuadorian lawsuit seeking $27 billion in environmental damages. On Thursday, Judge Lewis Kaplan of the District Court in Manhattan ruled in favor of Chevron's request to view the 600 hours of outtakes from Crude. The decision has raised concerns over both the outcome of the Ecuadorian lawsuit as well as the future of protections and privileges granted to journalists. Chevron spokesman Kent Robertson welcomed the ruling and told the press that Berlinger might have unwittingly captured misconduct by the court in Ecuador and the plaintiff's legal team. He added, quote, "Given the level of opposition to Chevron gaining access to the outtakes, we have to believe there's damning content that was left on the cutting room floor. It's in the interest of justice that these events are known more broadly." But the director and producer of Crude, Joe Berlinger, says there's no smoking gun and has vowed to appeal the ruling. I'm joined now by Joe Berlinger. Joe, welcome to Democracy Now! Explain your response to this decision against you.
Hey there, Amy. How are you? It's actually Berlinger, just so you know. The idea that there must be some smoking gun is why we're opposing it is just a complete disregard for any belief in the First Amendment. I am a journalist. I am covered by a journalist privilege, we hope, and there's a certain, and unfortunately, federal law does allow for the piercing of journalist privilege, but only when you show relevance and specific footage. This is a broad request to turn over my entire files. It'd be like inviting someone to rummage through your underwear drawer to find something incriminating. We are shocked by the judge's decision at the broadness of the request. Anything that's in the film, there's tremendous. I believe Crude shows both sides of the situation, and there's a lot in the film that they could have used to go on a more narrow request, but they've not done that. They've simply asked for the entire footage to be turned over to go on a fishing expedition.
I want to go to some of the clips of your film. This excerpt featuring the two Chevron fighting lawyers you profile, American attorney Stephen Danziger and Ecuadorian lawyer Pablo Fajardo.
When I began working on this case, I didn't have any professional experience litigating cases. I have never felt inferior to any of the Texaco lawyers. Because when I say something, they have to think 1,000 times. To come up with a lie in order to counter my truth, they have to think much harder than me. I know I always tell the truth, and if I have to die for it, then I will with pleasure.
This is about fighting hundreds of years of history, in Latin America, and it's about fighting one of the most powerful companies in the world with people who have literally no resources and are some of the most marginalized people on earth. So, it's a completely unequal battle. The fact we're in the game is a huge victory. The fact we're having a trial is a miracle. It's historic. This is becoming, like we had always envisioned, a true national issue. It's about a nation that got completely screwed over by an American company, and about a continent, to take it out a little further, that has really never been treated with a whole lot of respect by American corporate power. It's always been seen from United Fruit in Guatemala and the CIA doing a coup there in '54, to Nicaragua with Somoza supported by the Marines, for several decades. It's always been a place that's been seen sort of as the backyard of the United States. And, it's changing now, and we're riding that wave of change.
We don't defend PetroEcuador. They've done plenty of bad things. We hope to have another trial against PetroEcuador so that they are held accountable for their actions. What we have to do is each one is responsible for themselves. Texaco did terrible things. Texaco has to answer for itself. PetroEcuador does things they have to answer. What they want is to say everything is Petro's fault so that they are free from responsibility. We will not allow that.
Excerpts from the film Crude, ending on the Ecuadorian attorney Pablo Fajardo responding to Chevron's attempts to blame PetroEcuador for the pollution. Explain this further.
Well, you know, this is a long case that's been going on for 17 years. Basically, Texaco is accused from the late 60s till the early 90s when they left the country of, you know, massive environmental damage. The lawsuit was filed in '93 in a New York court. After 9 years of struggling in the U.S., the case was finally thrown out and remanded to Ecuador. So the case was refiled and finally got on its feet in 2003, 2004, around the time I started my film. One of the things the plaintiffs allege is that the system of oil production that was created by Texaco was then turned over to PetroEcuador. And so any damage that PetroEcuador has done is also Texaco's fault. In the meantime, Texaco and Chevron merged, and so Chevron now has inherited this lawsuit. But because it's taken so long for the lawsuit to get off the ground, it's easy for Chevron to now point a finger at PetroEcuador and say, oh, the pollution is PetroEcuador's. But in fact, according to the plaintiffs, this lawsuit was filed back in '93.
This is another clip from the film Crude. Here, a resident of San Carlos, Ecuador, Maria Garofalo, describes how the contamination in the water has impacted her family's ability to survive.
My daughter here together with the family. For me, it's quite sad. First, I had the problem. And now my daughter, who's so young, to have a disease such as cancer. We are people who don't have the means to pay for our daughter's treatment. My daughter is 18 years old. For each treatment that I have and each treatment that my daughter has, I need $500. Where am I going to get $500 every 15 to 20 days for every appointment she has? I bought chickens to raise in hopes of making some money to pay for my daughter's treatment. Now we don't have anything because everything has just died. All the animals are dying from contamination because they run to the stream and drink the water. The animals drink that water and die, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's why we say there's no life here for the animals, and it's even worse for us humans.
Chevron takes those kinds of allegations very seriously. So that was one of my mandates, was to investigate the health allegations. So we've hired external epidemiologists as well as our internal epidemiologists, health risk assessors, to look at all of the data to investigate this. And what we found is that there's absolutely no evidence that there's an increase in cancer death rate.
That excerpt from the film Crude, ending with Chevron chief environmental scientist Sarah McMillan. Your response to that, Joe Berlinger?
Well, you know, I mean, the style of the film is to show both sides, and the film is actually rather neutral with regard to the lawsuit. Obviously, I am extremely sympathetic to the plight of the indigenous people there. The people in that region have suffered tremendous environmental damage and tremendous health effects. And this lawsuit has been characterized by an extremely lengthy process. Chevron has flooded the court with paper. They are the ones who wanted to try this thing in Ecuador to get it out of the U.S. court system. And at the time, they testified as to the fairness and efficiency of the Ecuadorian court system, now that it's not going their way, they are claiming that the process is unfair, not transparent, and has become politicized.